Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. It's the next to the last Sunday in August 2020. And I'd like to share with you some of the things that have been going on around home, or not overseas, here, while you were busy doing other things. The COVID thing is hot and going. It will as long as there's an election coming up. And it's always in the news. But here's some policies and some decisions that the Democrats have recently made. And I say that because, they've got a Democrat presidential candidate and the tons of people that surround this man making all the decisions and stuff. They're the ones that are now getting involved. You can go out and riot in support of left-wing causes. And you can do this because this is a moral urgency. But everyone else must lock down, must stay away from people, must wear a mask, with the expectancy that hospitals will be overloaded. You can transfer older patients to nursing homes, forcing nursing homes to accept COVID patients. There are a little over 5 million cases of COVID total in the U.S., with over 170,000 deaths. And now it seems that nearly half of all deaths from COVID in the U.S. are traced to these policies, largely passed, motivated by Democrats, trying to help. If I were in charge, this is the way it would be, because this is the way it should be. We put the seniors in jail and the criminals in the nursing homes. And you said, that's ludicrous, that's crazy. What are you talking about? It would correct two important things in one motion. Seniors would have access to showers, hobbies, and walks. They would receive unlimited free prescriptions, dental and medical treatment, wheelchairs, and other things. They would receive money instead of having to pay out money. They would have constant video monitoring so they would be helped instantly if they should fall or need assistance. Bedding would be washed twice a week and all clothing would be ironed and returned to them. A guard would check on them every 20 minutes. All meals and snacks would be brought to them. They would have family visits in a suite built for that purpose. They would have access to a library, to weight and fitness equipment, spiritual counseling, a swimming pool, and education. Oh, and free admission to in-house concerts by nationally recognized entertaining artists. Simple clothing, shoes, slippers, PJs, and legal aid would be free upon request. There would be private, secure rooms provided for all with an outdoor exercise yard complete with gardens. Every senior would have a PC, a telephone, a television, and radio in their room, and it wouldn't cost anything. They could receive daily phone calls. There would be a board of directors to hear any complaints, and the ACLU there to fight for their rights and protection. The guards would have a code of conduct to be strictly adhered to, with attorneys available at no charge to protect seniors and their families from abuse and neglect. And as for the criminals would be in the nursing homes. They would not be guaranteed hot food. They would be left alone and unsupervised for long periods of time. They would receive showers once a week when employees had time. They would live in tiny rooms for which they would have to pay $5,000 a month. They would also have no hope of ever getting out. That's America in the 21st century. Here's some more facts about life and the times in which we live. 62%, that's 197 million Americans, are considered white. 12.6%, or 40.2 million Americans, are black, while 6.9%, 53.9 million, are Hispanic. That gives us a total of 318,562 people. 318,588,162 people. 117,716 237 households. Currently, the 12% are complaining about being discriminated against, while the 16.9% are going about their business taking care of their families. You see, the American dream consists of hard work and determination over time. It isn't handed to you. The people in the streets today are apparently not working. How do I know that? They're in the streets. Every time you turn around, the streets loaded with these people. I don't have that kind of time, do you? And so they're not participating in the American dream. And they're out there complaining that they aren't getting their fair share of respect and wealth. Does all that sound about right? In addition, the COVID recession has hit the whole world at once. This is the first time that every nation has simultaneously seen a decline in output since the Great Depression. Despite the scale of this economic disaster, many economists are calling for a quick V-shaped recovery once the coronavirus is brought under control. But is that likely? No. You see, even if the virus disappears tomorrow, we won't see a V-shaped recovery. Why? Because the central bank policies and unrestrained government spending. The world's central banks, U.S. Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, Bank of Japan, and others, have made reckless policy decisions for decades. But their bad policy decisions kicked into overdrive following the Great Recession of 2008-2009. After September 11th, central banks pushed out artificially low interest rates. These low rates, along with other poorly thought out government policies, blew a massive housing bubble. When the bubble burst, central bankers and politicians rewarded corrupt and incompetent bankers and business executives with huge bailouts. The US dollar and every other national currency in the world is fiat currency. That means they aren't backed up by anything but government promises. They only have value because governments say so. They're nothing but pieces of paper or ones and zeros in a computer. And that means governments can create as much currency as they want with a quick click of a button. Unrestrained by a gold standard, they created new currency to fill the holes created by bad decisions, by mismanagement, by the misallocation of resources. They propped up a broken financial system and blew yet another asset bubble in the process. When COVID popped that bubble, we saw a new round of bailouts and central bank schemes to elevate financial markets and avoid the inevitable. We also saw direct government payments to individuals in the hope of stimulating the economy. This is only possible because governments can create new currency at will. But in so doing, they've distorted the free market. And they're not going to be able to hold off the consequences forever. The bill is going to come due soon. COVID didn't cause the coming crisis, but it certainly accelerated it. In the last few months, central bankers and politicians have flooded the world with trillions of dollars in new currency. And we can't get change at the bank, at least not much. Their answer to every financial problem is to throw more and more money and an ever-expanding list of government aid programs and targeted bailouts. Option number one to resolve all this is called deflation. Think the Great Depression. Option number two is hyperinflation. Think the Weimar Republic of Germany in the 1920s. Option two brings $50 loaves of bread. That's an exaggeration, but serious price increases are coming. At best, the result will be a 1970s style stagflation with high unemployment and runaway inflation. At worst, we'll see a total collapse of the purchasing power of all fiat currencies relative to gold, silver, and other hard assets. I was thinking about the 1970s this week as I read this article. Maybe some of you weren't here for the 1970s, or you weren't old enough to remember. I was making $6 an hour in those days. On that $6 an hour, I bought a 2-story, 3-bedroom home. I was married. I had 3 children. I owned and operated 2 cars. And 2 of my children were in private school while I was going to Bible college. The buying power of that $6 is now $25. That's how the dollar has declined in value over the last 45 years. And if the experts are right, that could double in the next 10 years. Kamala Harris, you saw her this week. She's running on a ticket with Joe Biden to be the Vice President of the United States. The bettors in Las Vegas don't give Joe much hope of getting to year number 3. But that's another story. Kamala Harris's family, their Family Friendly Schools Act would have affected a few test schools. But the proposed pilot program reveals what she really thinks public schools' role should be. Her proposal would push school hours to 6 p.m. for children of working parents and open schools for child care during parent-teacher conferences and other off days. Harris claimed that the plan would not require teachers and staff to work extra hours, despite extending the school day by an entire 3 hours. The move would put children in the direct care of the government for some 10 hours a day as their parents work. This at a time when public schools have outright lied to parents in order to push a dangerous progressive identity agenda. The ramifications of children spending this long in the care of government workers is clear. Common Core. You remember Common Core 2010. Common Core has devastated our public primary education system. In the subjects of math, science, and reading, we now have slipped to 21 spots below China on an international assessment of student knowledge. And it's unlikely that 3 extra hours in the care of Department of Education will close that embarrassing gap. While schools will eventually reopen, no matter who wins in November, it's becoming clear that an administration led by Biden and Harris would leave education completely unrecognizable. Convenient for parents who both want to have jobs and bring in good money, not so good for the children. There's a website that I use quite often. It's called Axios.com. Axios' Sarah Fisher writes that a new report from Lean In, founded by Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg, finds that for every 100 men promoted to manager in America, 58 black women are promoted, despite black women asking for promotions at the same rate. Now keep in mind there are more men in managerial jobs than there are women. And that's because there are more men in business than there are women. And there are fewer black women in the country. It is estimated that in the next 8 years, black women will account for 12% of women in the labor force. This from an outfit called Catalyst.org, a study called Workplaces That Work for Women. And in leadership, the report indicates black women are promoted 58% of the time. And yet somehow, all this is a problem. California has a new bill, AB 2218. The bill would establish a Transgender Wellness and Equity Fund within the state's Department of Public Health. The benefit goes to the organizations, hospitals, and healthcare clinics that, quote, provide gender-conforming healthcare services, assuming they have an established partnership with a trans-led organization, end of quote. As you might imagine, it sailed through the Assembly in June. It passed the State Senate Appropriations Committee 7-0, along party lines. But it was tabled this past week on Tuesday and would not be considered for the remainder of the year. The bill would have funded experimental treatments such as drugs that block normal puberty in gender-confused minors, prescriptions for opposite-sex hormones, and surgical procedures that amputate breasts and genitals, as well as removing reproductive organs such as the uterus and ovaries. The bill originally asked for $15 million to start the fund, but that figure was later scrubbed from the text of the proposal. Considered controversial, the bill was set aside. California Family Council President Jonathan Keller, in a press release, said the people of California spoke, and the Senate Health Committee listened. My guess is that all of this was done, as they say, in the dark of night, and when the public found out about it, they screamed bloody murder. Donald Trump is our president, but Donald Trump is a womanizer and a serial adulterer. He's had 3 wives. Not that he had sex with them before he was married, but the Bible limits us to 1. And the Bible says that if you leave the one and get another, it's a sin. You're an adulterer or an adulteress. Joe Biden is a committed Roman Catholic with high morals. And Jill and Joe Biden have a long-lasting marriage and love story. She helped stabilize his life after a great tragedy when his first wife died in a car crash that also killed their infant daughter. Joe and Jill married on June 17, 1977 at the United Nations Chapel in New York City. Jill, an educator, became stepmom to Biden's 2 sons from his first wife, Nelia, and the couple would go on to have a daughter together named Ashley. However, according to Joe Biden, he met his current wife Jill on a blind date in 1975, and they fell in love. According to Jill's ex-husband, she was having an affair with Biden in 1974 and even worked for him before their supposed first date. Now that makes Jill's ex-husband a liar. Or it makes Joe a liar and an adulterer. It does, however, explain why Biden picked Kamala Harris as his running mate. She too broke up a marriage with an affair. Joe doesn't apparently think this is wrong. But Joe Biden is a Roman Catholic. What he has done is called a mortal sin in the Roman Catholic Church. The Catholic Catechism says to commit a mortal sin, the 3 following elements must be simultaneously present. It first categorizes mortal sins as seriously evil. First of all, there has to be full knowledge. One has to know that what he or she is doing has serious evil content. And two, it must be full or deliberate consent. One accepts or tolerates what he or she is doing. Now, in the explanation, they say grave matter is specified by the Ten Commandments, corresponding to the answer of Jesus to the rich young man. Do not kill, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and your mother. Biblically, the word honor implies money as well as everything else. The gravity of sins is more or less great. Murder is graver than theft. But one must also take into account who is wronged. Violence against parents is in itself graver than violence against a stranger. That from the Catholic Catechism, 1858 version. The Roman Catholic is presented with a representative list of sins in his catechism. They are blasphemy, curses, unfaithfulness to promises made to God, false oaths, and perjury. You can look them up. Not going to Holy Mass during Sundays and holy days of obligation without a just motive, meaning you're sick. Catechism 1389. Direct abortion, willed as an end or as means, as well as cooperation in it. And attached to this sin is the penalty of excommunication, because from the moment of his or her conception, the human being must be absolutely respected and protected in his integrity. Keep in mind, in the Roman Catholic system, excommunication means you will not get to heaven. It is the most serious penalty the Roman Catholic Church has to offer. And then there are grave sins against chastity. They differ according to their object, whether it's adultery, masturbation, fornication, pornography, prostitution, rape, or homosexual activity. These sins are expressions of the vice of lust. These kinds of acts committed against the physical and moral integrity of minors become even more grave. Catholic Catechism talking, not me. Direct sterilization, contraception of any kind, artificial fecundation, adultery, divorce, polygamy, incest, free unions, meaning cohabitation or concubinage, and fornication or sexual acts before or outside of marriage are all in this category. Oh, and there's also lying in some cases. Catechism 2484. False witness and perjury, Catechism 2476. Rash judgment, detraction, calumny, Catechism 2477. Calumny is a false statement, maliciously made to injure another person's reputation. Oh, and there's also adulation, 2480. The violation of the sacramental seal, 2490. And divulgation of professional secrets, 2491. Priests in their official responsibility, specifically in the confessional, come under this category. They're not supposed to tell anybody anything. Then there's greed, unbridled covetousness for the goods of others, and envy, which is the sadness one experiences at the sight of another's good, and immoderate desire to acquire the other's goods for themselves. The conclusion here is if a person knowingly, especially a Catholic, with full knowledge, they went to catechism, right? And wantingly, that is, with full consent, commits an action consisting of any of the grave matters just listed above, a mortal sin has been committed. A mortal sin is a sin that will result in your going to hell if you don't confess it to a priest before you die. Now, you do remember every sin you've committed, right? Well, that's right. Priests in the Catholic Church can accept blanket confessions in places of specifics. For example, if I have done anything. It's a great system. But if the system is as it's presented in print, that's what it is, Joe Biden is in serious trouble with his God. We have currently an issue relative to drafting women into the military. The selective service system can draft a man upon reaching age 18. He must register with the agency within 30 days. Now, we haven't drafted anybody for a while. But the selective service keeps a list of all men, 18 to 25, as eligible for the draft. But a lawsuit was brought by the National Coalition for Men. It argued that permitting women to avoid selective service violates the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Last year, U.S. District Judge Gray Miller sided with the organization, but this week, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed Miller and said they were bound by Supreme Court precedent. You see, the High Court upheld a male-only draft as constitutional in a 1981 case. Only the Supreme Court may revise its precedent, said the Fifth Circuit Court. And finally, there's common sense. Saying gay rights and freedom of speech can coexist. A federal judge Friday sided with a Christian photographer in ruling the city of Louisville, Kentucky, saying she cannot be forced to work at same-sex weddings. The case involved a Christian photographer, Chelsea Nelson by name, who owns a studio that specializes in photography, editing, and blogging about weddings. She sued Louisville in 2019, claiming its anti-discrimination law would require her to photograph a same-sex wedding and thus violate her First Amendment rights. On Friday, U.S. District Judge Justin Walker sided with Nelson and issued a preliminary injunction prohibiting the city from enforcing the law against her in her photography and her blogging. Nelson will likely succeed in her lawsuit, he ruled. America is wide enough for those who applaud same-sex marriage and those who refuse to, the judge wrote. Forcing citizens to express ideas contrary to their deepest convictions is always demeaning. Free thought includes both the right to speak freely and to say nothing at all. The city, he wrote, is attempting to compel religious speech at the core of the First Amendment. Photography is a form of art, he asserted, and art is speech protected by the U.S. Constitution. ADF Senior Counsel Jonathan Scruggs applauded the decision. That's been what's going on around here in our little country as you were doing other things. When we come back, we'll talk about the Great Escape. Stay with me.